Hi, good evening. It's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Well, I had a chance over the past couple of days to go through some old picture tags of plants that I've planted in my garden over the past couple of years. And you know what I found printed on nearly every single one of them? It's a statement that goes something like either Asexual Propagation Prohibited or Unlicensed Propagation Prohibited, or some of them just list Plant Patent Applied For. And I wondered, does the average home gardener even know what that means or how it applies to them? Is it even intended to apply to them? So I thought I'd go through my understanding of plant patents and pass that along to you. So first things first, the analogy I would make is to compare the plant patents a bit like the copyright on a DVD or a CD. So you buy a DVD, you have a physical copy of a movie, and you can do whatever you want with that. You can take that and you can watch it as many times as you want in any device that you want. You can store it in the freezer. You can burn it or throw it away when you're done with it, but it's your physical copy. The one thing that they don't permit you to do is to take copies of it and distribute it to your friends or even people you don't like. So you're not permitted to make copies of it. That's the same thing with plants. It's a different law that applies. It's a patent versus a copyright, but it's the same basic thing about intellectual property. The plant breeder, say, or discoverer, because it can apply to plants that are discovered in cultivation as well, but those people have put in some work on this plant. It took some talent to spot it if they just discovered the plant, and also they have to test it and make sure it's stable and all of that, and then put it to market. Also, if you've done a breeding program, it takes massive amounts of hours. So they have to plant it, they do the breeding, the cross-pollinating, thousands of seedlings go in, and then evaluate, and eventually what they have, if they've done it right, is something they can take to the patent office and say, I've made a good variety that is different than what's on the market right now. And if they're granted a patent on that, they're given a period of time in which nobody else is allowed to make copies of that plant by asexual means. The period of time in Canada and the United States for most plants is 20 years. And I thought I'd circle back just a half step here and say what they mean by asexual propagation, because they're not talking about saving seeds. That would be fine. What they're talking about is taking cuttings, dividing, taking root divisions, tissue culture, anything like that where you end up with a plant that is genetically identical to the original plant. That is not permitted. So legally, I think that's the long and short of it. But I should say one other thing here is if you take your legal advice from YouTube, you're kind of a fool, even if it comes from an honest looking guy like me. So if you're planning on doing some propagation and you have some questions about licensing and that sort of thing, you really should get better advice than this. But that's the long and short of it. So I did want to go ahead and start talking a little bit about the home gardener, because frankly it's a little bit like that tag you find on a mattress where they say do not remove this tag. For the home gardener, the unlicensed or asexual propagation prohibited, that really isn't something that they're worried about from you. I'm not saying that you're permitted to do so. What I'm saying is that you're not the target of that statement. They're really talking about people who are taking cuttings or propagating to distribute or sell for profit. So let me start with the most innocuous possible example. Let's say you went out to the garden center and you purchased a perennial. You put it into your garden. It had that tag on it, said asexual propagation prohibited, but it did really, really well in your garden. And just in the course of gardening, if it gets to be a big patch, what you would probably do out there, it's what I do, is in the fall you go with a sharp spade and you would divide the clump into 2 or 4 and you distribute it around your garden. Well, technically, you don't have permission to do that. But let's just say from a moral standpoint, I don't think you could feel too bad about that. You're not depriving anybody of income, you're not distributing it, You're not causing a problem or any lost income for anybody. And practically speaking, in addition, let me assure you that there's no such thing as the plant patent cops who go from yard to yard talking to gardeners and making them prove that they haven't divided or taken some cuttings of a few of the varieties and then just spread it throughout their own yard. However, let's go to the next example. Let's say you took cuttings of a variety and you gave it to your brother, gave it to your sister, donated it to the local plant sale for your garden club. Then I think you've crossed kind of a moral line there, and they still might not be able to find you out. They still may not be able to enforce it, but from my point of view, as soon as what you've done is you've distributed to other people who might otherwise have bought that variety, you've deprived those breeders or those discoverers of the proper income that would have come from licensing that plant for propagation to another grower. Okay, so let's go to the final scenario here, where let's say you are a backyard nursery like me, okay? And there are lots of varieties out there, some of which are past their patent period, some of which never were patented, and some of which are still within their patent period. And indiscriminately, you go around and start taking cuttings of these, dividing these, and putting them out, selling them like I do at the farmer's market or anywhere else. And you've kind of taken a haphazard approach to other people's intellectual property. I would say, again, your chances of getting caught are fairly low, but please don't do this, especially if you're trying to build a business for yourself, like I do. I'm careful. I don't want to ruin my reputation, and that's one thing, and I don't want to do the wrong thing. I guess eventually, if you scaled up enough, which is my hope, is to make my business a little bit larger over time, you could actually get to the point where it would be worth their while to enforce those patent provisions, and they could press a civil suit against you or something along those lines. I don't know exactly how that would go, but I don't want to find out, and again, I don't want to ruin my reputation in the meantime as kind of a bad actor within the space of the horticulture community, especially since I also have a job there as well. I wanted to go through one more thing, but I might go on to my computer here and just show you really quickly, because the tags are printed at a certain time and these patents do run out. So what you need to be able to do if you're considering propagating a plant, like I propagate roses all the time, what I need to be able to do is find out when that patent period started or where it was introduced, and whether I now am allowed to propagate for it. I'm back here on one of my favorite sites, you know it. This is Help Me Find Roses. Now, I thought I'd first check out a rose that I'm 100% sure is still covered by patent. That's Coco Loco. I've had a few requests for that one recently. And scrolling down here, it's great that they have collected the information into one spot here. So you can see this one was registered in Australia in 2015 and in the United States in 2012. So we're still many, many years away from this one being out of patent period. And for that intermediate time, if I have plants that I want to be able to sell to people and I am not permitted to propagate them, I probably won't even go through the trouble of getting licensed. What I'll do is I'll just buy them from the wholesaler and resell them and just let people know that that's how I came across them. Most of my roses here are sold are own root roses. That might mean that this one is bare root, purchased from a supplier, but my customers will understand that if they're looking for an interesting new variety. I wanted to go back to one other one here that I'm quite sure is now out of patent period. This is one called Fellowship. And if you look down here, it says that the most recent listing of any patent applied for or granted is 1996. So this is quite a nice variety of rose. Fellowship. I've posted some pictures of this one. and the most recent is 1996, which means I feel relatively safe saying that that one is outside of patent period, and I can go ahead and propagate that. And if you want to be sure on some of these, you can actually take the patent number that's across the bottom here and plug it into Google, and it'll tell you. So for instance, on this one here, this is Coco Loco. That's the code name that they've used for it there. But it actually goes through the description of the patent and everything else. So that's kind of nice that you can look that up on Google. Another one here that I'll show you is if you ran into this beautiful hydrangea and all the patterns on there, and I saw that one, I thought, hey, I gotta see if I can propagate that or whether I have to purchase that. And that there was registered or introduced in 1996, meaning now it's 2018, that's over 20 years later. I'm not 100% sure, but this is a good starting spot to begin with to know whether you're even in the ballpark of being able to propagate yourself, whether you want to buy it from a licensed grower, or how you'd want to go about it. All right, that should wrap it up for me. Thank you so much for watching my video today, and if you have any questions, please leave them down below.